Hello, everyone. This is Nathaniel Rutherford, the managing editor of RockyTopInsider.com, and bringing you the second part of the Mailbag episode of the RTI Recruiting Podcast. First part, we answered a lot of questions about 2021 prospects and talked a little bit about Tyrion Ingram-Dawkins and Peyton Page, and I believe William Parker as well, who was not mentioned in the questions, but we felt warranted a discussion. The second part here deals mostly with questions about the 2022 class, but we do actually touch on a 2021 prospect and a little bit about, I think, the 21 class in general too, but it's mostly about 22 prospects, talking about in-state players like Ty Simpson, talking about in-state players besides just him, but that Tennessee is targeting, and a few other little bits and pieces there as well. This is the end of the Mailbag episode. Like I said, wanted to do two parts because we had a ton of questions. It was about an hour-long podcast, so rather than make you listen to the hour-long part, we're going to split up here in two parts. So if you didn't listen to part one, be sure and check that out first. And now, without further ado, here's part two of the RTI Recruiting Podcast. Our last few questions here, Brandon, we've covered all the 2021 kids that we were asked about. Let's move on to some 2022 prospects that the listeners wanted to know about. Andrew McAmus asked us about Ty Simpson. He says Ty Simpson was recently ranked number 26 overall in the ESPN recruiting rankings, therefore making him one of the top quarterbacks to come out of the state in a long time, maybe ever. Who is Tennessee's main competition for him? And I think it's also worth noting that I'm going to have to go back and look. In the modern recruiting era, kind of 2001 to 3 up until now, I cannot think of a quarterback who has been rated as high as Ty Simpson that has come out of Tennessee. And there's been a lot of reasons for that. I've heard different, local media guys, I think it's Austin Price and a few other ones, kind of talking about why, a lot of times over the last, decade or so, Tennessee has been still kind of running the kind of the wing T stuff in high school. You have a lot of triple option type of offenses. You haven't had a lot of spread out kind of passer friendly offenses until the last 3, 4, 5 years or so. So Tennessee hasn't been on the national stages like the Texases and the Floridas and Californias or the Georgias for, the premier quarterback talent. But in this 2022 class, Tennessee has several pretty good quarterbacks. Not only Ty Simpson, you have Tevin Carter, you have Caden Martin, but we'll get to those two in a second. Right now, Brandon, in your opinion, who are the main competitors for Ty Simpson for Tennessee in this 2022 cycle?
He's got a lot of offers all over the country. I know LSU likes him a lot. Auburn likes him a lot. A lot of your usual suspects. LSU and Auburn are two of the names that I keep hearing coming up with him. It's still kind of even. We tend to see quarterbacks commit sooner than other positions. So even though this would be considered really early for a lot of guys in this 2022 class to be thinking about a commitment, you usually see quarterbacks commit early. Even then, it's still a bit early in his recruitment, especially without a camp season this year, especially without seeing his junior film yet. It'll be interesting to see what comes with Ty, but Auburn's involved, LSU's involved. I think Tennessee is definitely in a solid position with Ty. They have worked with him. He's somebody they want. They want to keep him home. They like him a lot. It's going to be interesting to see what Tennessee does. Tennessee has talked about maybe potentially taking more than one quarterback in that class. That could impact things. Of course, Tennessee has got a very crowded quarterback room right now. You have a very talented Caden Salter committed in the 2021 class. Mm-hmm. You have a Harrison Bailey who you expect to see battling for the starting position this year, but that could also, because of COVID and the way everything broke, could wind up taking a red shirt. You have Brian Maurer, who is, what is going to happen with Maurer? JT Shrout still. So you're still looking at a really crowded quarterback room that would impact what Simpson's opportunity would be. So it's going to be an interesting one to watch. Tennessee has got a legitimate shot there. They have a legitimate shot. There's genuine interest both ways. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there. I don't really want to put a call in just yet but there is genuine interest from both parties.
Yeah, I would say right now Tennessee, I would kind of pencil them in as the leader. Like you said, it's too early to call. He's not, I don't think, in a rush to make any sort of decisions. Really, a lot of these recruits in both the 22 and 21 classes, especially I think 22, are not in a rush to make any sort of commitment because, I mean, they haven't gone to go see a lot of schools, period. These guys who are rising seniors have at least been able to, I'd say for the most part, a lot of them have been able to at least go, in their junior year during the season to go visit some places, were maybe able to go to some junior days and things like that. But these 22 kids, I mean, they've probably not had a chance much at all, unless you're like Ty Simpson, who's an in-state kid, haven't really a chance to go visit a lot of other programs other than the ones that you've been really interested in since your early days in your recruitment. So I don't think you're going to see a lot of 22 kids commit early at this point. But I would very much say Tennessee is the leader right now over Simpson, but that's as you said, still a long way to go with that one. Still a lot of suitors in his recruitment that could change things between now and whenever he decides to make a commitment. But Simpson is a gifted athlete. Got really good film. If you haven't watched his film yet, go check it out. He does a really good job of breaking down film and stuff too. So he's a really good gifted prospect in the state of Tennessee. Brandon, speaking of the state of Tennessee in the 2022 cycle, I think the last thing we'll mention here and talk about on this mailbag episode of the podcast was asked by Chris Lane on Twitter. So again, thank you to all of you who asked questions for this episode. How many of the 2022 in-state kids do you think Tennessee lands? And they asked for who. I think it might be a little early to break down all of them, but I did mention we mentioned Ty Simpson. In the state, over in Memphis, you have Tevin Carter. You have Caden Martin, T. Martin's son, who plays at Knoxville Catholic, who, I mean, that kid could play in baseball. He might end up playing baseball, or might even go from high school to get to the draft in baseball. He's a gifted baseball athlete.
There are legitimate talks that Caden Martin could be the number one baseball prospect in the country if he decides to go to college. There's also talk that Caden Martin could legitimately be the number one player drafted in the Major League Baseball draft if he goes straight to the majors. If he goes straight into the professional ranks. Caden, it's worth noting, obviously, that his dad is T. Martin. His dad is at Tennessee. The opportunity to play for his dad has got to be big. They live in Knoxville. His dad is a Tennessee legend. But it's also really important to note Caden Martin loves Tony Vitello, the Tennessee baseball coach. He loves Tony Vitello. We have talked a little bit. Rick Barnes has played a big role in Tennessee landing some football players that are also going to play basketball. In this cycle and in 2022, Tony Vitello could play a big role in Tennessee landing some guys that play football and play baseball that wind up being dual sport guys. And if you're Tennessee right now, you look at football, basketball, and baseball all pretty well being in a healthy place for the first time in a long time. All three are in a healthy place. All three are trending in the right direction. You have good recruiters at all three in all three programs. All three are having success. All three are putting guys in the professional leagues at high levels, and they're having success when they're getting there. That's a good thing, especially when you're a guy like Jeremy Pruitt who likes multi-sport guys. Mm-hmm. It's those other programs and their health and the way they are and the way they're recruited are gonna impact some of these guys you can get, and it's paid off for Tennessee, and it looks like it may continue to do so.
Yeah, I made a point on Twitter. Our staff writer here at RTI, Ben McKee, tweeted out a graphic showing that Tennessee baseball, their current recruiting class, is ranked 5th in the country. Of course, I think it's also like 4th or 5th in the SEC because as rough and tumble as football is in the SEC, baseball is a whole different monster. I mean, it is. If you think it's tough to win in the SEC in football, watch SEC baseball.
And softball might be better than baseball.
Yeah, I mean those two sports, softball and baseball, are extremely difficult in the SEC. But Tennessee's ranked 5th in there. Tennessee, just came off a top 5 class in men's basketball and looking definitely like they're going to be competing for maybe even the number 1 spot in the 2021 class. Tennessee football currently a top 5 class in the 21 cycle. And Lady Vols are nabbing 5 stars as well, just like they should be. So right now, the 4 major programs at Tennessee, football, men's basketball, Lady Vols, and baseball, they're all recruiting at an extremely high level. So that's going to bode well for, like you said, everyone, not just football, but every kid who's a multi-sport athlete who these other teams are going after. They can point to the health of the other programs. But to continue here for the 22 prospects, those are just the quarterbacks. You also have Jordan James out of Murfreesboro.
Can we talk about Jordan James for a minute?
Absolutely. Go ahead.
Oh, goodness, this kid's good. Jordan James is a special athlete. I was enormously impressed with him. I had a chance to watch him in person twice last year. He has transferred schools. Last season, he was playing for Brentwood Academy, and this season he'll be playing for Oakland High School in Murfreesboro. James at Brentwood Academy, I watched him play 2 games last year, and he played we were at the Brentwood Academy Knox Catholic game that was played on ESPN2. The other game that I got to watch him against that he really, and he had a really good game against Knoxville Catholic. His statistics were not as good because he got hurt in the other game that I watched him in, but I was really impressed by him. They played Whitehaven in Nashville, in Brentwood. And, of course, squared off against Bryson Eason, Tamarion McDonald, Martavius French, Alubai, who's also a 2022 kid that we're going to talk about, that Tennessee's interested in, has offers all over the country, but he's also on that Whitehaven defense. And I was talking to the guy standing next to me, and I said, man, it's going to be tough to turn the corner on this Whitehaven defense for Brentwood, because as good as this line is, those 3 linebackers are all SEC linebackers. They're going to be in discussions to start early wherever they go, and it's going to be tough to get the corner. And that left my mouth, and Jordan James took a handoff, got the corner, and ripped off 15 yards, and I went, who is that kid? Speed. Great straight line speed, great acceleration, and he's listed at 5'9.5", 200 pounds, and man, he runs bigger than that. Somebody forgot to give him the memo that he's supposed to be a little guy that goes down easy, because he runs like a power back. He will hit you in the chest and run through you, good quickness, but man, the speed is what stands out. I'm excited to see him at Oakland this year with the offense that they run, because Oakland kind of spreads things out, and that offense is always good. They're always good on offense, but to bring a kind of back like James in there, where he's also a good receiver, so he's going to be an asset when they decide to throw the ball, but he's not going to see as many stacked boxes as he did at Brentwood Academy either, because you can't afford to, or Oakland's going to throw the ball for 1 million yards on you. He's going to get his chances at Oakland, and I expect him to put up big numbers. Tennessee is very interested in him. We had an opportunity to talk at the Knoxville Catholic Brentwood Academy game. T. Martin was there. We got a chance to talk with him a little bit. He knew Jordan James by name already well, was excited about him. This is a kid to watch. I really want to see Tennessee land this young man. I know there is definitely interest on Tennessee's part. I've not had a chance to talk to Jordan much, but Tennessee is interested. They are aware of him, and I think he's a guy that would fit really nicely into that running back room.
Yeah, I like Jordan James a lot, and I'm very excited to see what he does at Oakland. Like you said, their offense, I think, will be a better fit for him as well. The other running back that they're out there would be Kendall Jackson, who plays at Oak Ridge. At receiver, you have Isaiah Horton, Taylor Groves, and Cameron Miller as kind of the 3 main names to throw out there. Isaiah Horton, again, plays at Oakland, just like Jordan James. Groves plays at East Robertson over in Cross Plains. Cameron Miller plays at Memphis at the Memphis Academy of Health Sciences. They have Carson Gay listed as a tight end at Tennessee offered. He plays at Boyd Buchanan down in Chattanooga. Offensive line, you have Fisher Anderson, and you mentioned Aluba, who plays at Whitehaven, and then Jacob Hood at Hillsboro, and Anderson plays at Franklin. I think all 3 of those are names to keep an eye on for sure. Eric Gaston at Cane Ridge, James Howard at McCallie, Langston Patterson at Christian Presbyterian Academy at CPA. These are all defensive linemen. Sorry, Gaston is a defensive end, and Howard is a tackle. And then Patterson is a linebacker. Keaton Wade is another linebacker, plays at Summit over in Spring Hill. Elijah Herring plays at Riverdale in Middle Tennessee. And then you have a couple of athletes who can kind of go in different positions, but I think one of the bigger ones here to mention would be, of course, Dallin Hayden, who is a legacy, whose brother Chase Hayden transferred out of Arkansas and ended up going to ECU, but Tennessee kind of kicked the tires there a little bit, and their father Aaron was a standout at Tennessee. You also have Cody Jones at Fairleigh, Quincy Briggs at Memphis Central, and Tommy Winton, at Knoxville Catholic. Are there anyone else you throw in there, Brandon? And if there's anyone else, who among those group of players would you kind of highlight and say Tennessee has kind of the best chance of landing, as of right now, in this 22 cycle?
Another guy I want to add is Barryon Brown. Barryon Brown plays at Pearl Cone, and again, fast. Oh my goodness, fast. It is difficult to stand out at Pearl Cone with speed. Like, if that's your defining characteristic, that's a tough school to do that at. And Barryon Brown stands out with speed. He's an athlete. I like him as a wide receiver. He's going to be a guy to keep an eye on. I think you mentioned Cody Jones, who's I don't know what you do with him. You just put him on the football field and let him be better than the guy across from him. That's where I'm at with him. I really like his film. He's a good player. It's a good 2022 class for Tennessee. I'm a big Tommy Winton fan. I like Tommy a lot. Very intelligent young man. Outstanding interview. Tommy's a guy that runs routes like a receiver, has hands like a receiver, but the instant he catches the ball, he turns into a running back. And he's a unique talent because of that. I think Tennessee's in a really, really good spot there. Fisher Anderson is a guy to watch, to keep an eye on out in Franklin. I know there's some interest there. I want to see him play a little more. I want to see him going into his junior campaign. I want to see kind of how he fills out that frame, because he's still got a lot of growing to do. He's got weight to put on. I want to see kind of how he fills out. That will be an interesting one. I think Tennessee's got to feel really good about their chances with Dallin Hayden. Dallin's kind of been considered a Tennessee lean for a while now. Let me see here. Some of the other guys that you mentioned. Patterson at CPA. For those that remember Kane Patterson that wound up going to Clemson, this is his younger brother.
I was wondering about that. Yeah.
It is his younger brother. I've had the opportunity to watch him play, and even as a very young player last season, made an impact for CPA. I guess last year he would have been a freshman. Am I right? Freshman, sophomore? Would have been a sophomore.
Sophomore, yeah.
Would have been a sophomore. Playing against a really, really stacked Ravenwood team, he showed up on film. He made some plays on some guys who were going to be playing on D1 rosters this fall. He had a good game, really impressed me. He's a guy to watch as he grows that I think can grow into a good player. Gaston is another one that can play out at Cane Ridge. Jacob Hood at Hillsboro. Let me talk about Jacob Hood just for a minute.
Yeah, that's one I thought you'd bring up.
Yeah, that's because this kid has his own zip code. He is enormous. And I mean, I think as a sophomore last year, you have heard me talk about William Griffin and his size and how big he is, and that he's a big mauler offensive tackle, and it's just unbelievable how athletic he is at that size, and da 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 da. Yeah, he's bigger than Parker. Like, he's something like 6'8", 350. And that is not an exaggeration, folks. He is every bit of what he's listed. That kid is absolutely huge. He's going to have to learn to play at that size. Watching him play, there were times I got a chance to see Hillsboro a few times last season, And there were times during games I wanted them to be mean so bad. It's like, kid, if you were mean, if you didn't have a good heart and your parents hadn't done a good job, there would just be a trail of bodies behind you. And he's one of those kids, you're going to have to figure out how to get him to throw that switch. He plays too high. He's raw. He needs to work on his technique. Leverage is a big issue with him. He has the tools because he's not just 6'8" and big. He's 6'8". He's big. He's got the long arms. But if you don't have the technique to go with it, that size is a disadvantage when you play against guys who you can't just be bigger than. But Hood is a guy to watch. I'll be interested to see if Hillsborough doesn't play him more at defensive tackle this season. I'd really like to see him do some work at defensive tackle because I think he has a body type that he could be a nose tackle for a Division I team. I want to see him play it though. I want to see him play there and watch the skill set. But yeah, the frame on him, as young as he is, if you can get the technique with him and he can grow a little bit, he's going to be one to watch. There are several good players, really good players in that 2022 class.
Yep, we saw a strong crop of recruits in the 20 class of Tennessee. Did a good job of taking advantage of, and the 21 class has a pretty good amount of players, and Tennessee obviously has a few commitments from in-state kids and are still pursuing a few in-state prospects. But I agree with you. I think after I wouldn't say year off, but after a year that you kind of reset a little bit more in the 21 cycle, this 22 cycle is going to pick up where the 20 cycle left off and maybe even surpass it because you have the star power there of the quarterbacks for sure with Ty Simpson, Caden Martin, Tevin Carter, and then you have Jordan James, as we mentioned, Isaiah Horton, and then several offensive, defensive linemen, and just kind of athletes and running backs and stuff, and Dallin Hayden and a few of those other guys too. Barry Brown, you said, a speedy athlete as well. So there's going to be, I think the 22 class is one that Tennessee could capitalize on this strong crop of in-state kids, and then supplement that with even, or maybe the other way around, they can go out and nationally recruit and supplement that with a very strong group of in-state prospects.
Isaiah Horton is going to be another one to watch.
Yes,
I've watched him at Innsworth.
Man, Oakland's going to have a loaded team this upcoming season. Yeah,
I didn't know he had transferred.
According to his 247 sports profile, he's at Oakland now.
That's the first I've heard that I remember hearing about him transferring. But no, there's been a lot going on, and I may have heard and forgotten. But now Isaiah Horton is when you're on the field with Keyshawn Lawrence and Andre Turrentine in the same defensive backfield, and you can stick out, you've done something.
Yeah.
And Horton was able to do that as an underclassman at times. I really like Horton. I think at the next level he's going to find a home on offense, but really great frame, good speed, good kid. I pity teams having to defend Oakland this year because it is usually hard anyway, but good gracious this year with those two for the next 2 years, whew, that is not going to be fun.
No, it is not, but that is good news for Oakland, obviously, and I do like where Tennessee kind of sits with him right now, but still, again, this is the 2022 class. It's still pretty early on in that cycle, and Tennessee, it doesn't have any commitments right now in the 22 cycle, and I'll be interested to see when the 22 cycle really starts to kind of get going as far as commitments and stuff because of the current pandemic.
You're going to have to start getting kids on campus.
Yeah, and it's going to, we'll see when that happens, but yeah, it's going to take that before I think there's really going to be much movement in the 22 cycle, not just for Tennessee, but across the country as well. But Brandon, I think that'll do it here. That was a lot of good questions from our listeners. Oh, we had one more question as we're recording this, Brandon, that someone sent in because they saw me on Twitter tell someone that we're recording this right now. So we had someone send in a question kind of live. Again, we're another kind of live reaction here, Brandon. Michael Henry on Twitter asked, if it's not too late to add a question, what would it take to get Prince Kollie into this class? And we talked about him multiple times in the podcast, and then I can't remember when it was exactly, but he released a list of top teams and did not include Tennessee in there. It was a little bit of a surprise, but it wasn't a gigantic surprise at the same time. I can't remember we talked about it on the podcast. I know you and I texted back and forth about it the day it happened. But in your opinion, what would it take, good or bad, for Tennessee to get Prince Kollie in this 21 class? Because I think it would have to take Tennessee missing probably on a Smile Munden or having some sort of attrition that they weren't seeing happen, because I think Tennessee likes Kollie, but I think it really hurt him that there wasn't any camps this summer and he couldn't do a bunch of visits and stuff like that, because I think he has a lot of raw potential, but there is a lot of raw there as well. So I think unless things can change, unless Tennessee becomes impressed by what he does in his senior season, or unless Tennessee misses on someone, I think that, to me, that would be what it would take to get Prince Kollie in this class. And I like Prince Kollie. I think maybe if he doesn't come to Tennessee, maybe Tennessee misses on him. But if you're Tennessee, you end up getting a Smile Munden, I think you'll be happy with that miss, in my opinion. But I think Prince Kollie is a good athlete. I don't know they'll end up in this class, though.
I think Tennessee is looking at probably one more linebacker, maybe two. But numbers are going to be tight. And I don't know that you got room for two more linebackers, just to be honest, with the other needs that you have in the class. You're going to have some attrition. You're going to have some guys move around. But I think Tennessee's got one more linebacker, and they want Smile Munden.
Yeah.
I think if they miss on Munden, you may see Tennessee try to get back in it with Kollie by throwing everything but the kitchen sink at him. Mm-hmm. And that's definitely a possibility. But I don't know that Tennessee has given up on Junior Colson yet either.
Right.
I don't think Tennessee has given up there. I believe they like their chances. If they can stay involved there, going the distance, they're not going to go away. They like Colson a lot. If they realized early on that Colson wasn't happening and that Munden wasn't happening and kept the rest of the class, and they just threw everything they had at Kollie, they might be able to get back in, maybe. Collie's a good player. If Tennessee doesn't get him, they're probably going to have to play against him. He's a good player. I like him a lot. I think numbers are coming in a little bit. I think Collie's size hurts him just a little bit in Tennessee's defense. I think he's a little small for what they want. Not much. I think he's a little small for what they want. And he is raw. And I think those two things hurt him just a little bit. If Tennessee gets Munden, I think they're done, probably at linebacker, unless they could get Colson.
Right. Yeah.
I don't know that Kollie becomes the second linebacker. I think the only scenario I really see Tennessee taking a second one is if they can get Munden and Colson. And I like Kollie a lot. I really do. I'm a big fan. He's a really good player, and I would like to see him wind up in orange and white. But Tennessee's going to have to strike out pretty hard and then pour on all the steam they've got to even get back in the picture. And then they're going to be playing from behind in a recruitment where they started as the front runner. And I don't think pressed that advantage enough because they were waiting on Munden.
Yeah, and as good of a player as Kollie is, and I think you would back me up on this too, I like him even more as a person. Getting to interview him back when Tennessee offered, he is a phenomenal human being. Him and his family, they're a great family. Raised really well. He has a passion for not just athletics but for academics. He's a smart kid. Like him a lot. Like you said, I would love for him to be part of Tennessee's class just because I've gotten to talk with him, and I think he's a really good kid. But I also, at the same time, understand why he wouldn't include Tennessee in his list of top schools, and why Tennessee maybe didn't press the advantage, as you said, as well. But that will, in fact, wrap it up here for this episode of the RTI Recruiting Podcast. We appreciate you, all of you who sent in questions. Thank you all so much. Very productive mailbag episode. Thank you all for all the questions, and if we'll do another one of these in a a couple weeks, maybe a month or so. But Brandon, before we end the podcast here, I want you to go ahead and plug VR2. Go ahead and plug what you guys have on the site, what you guys have coming down the wire, and where they can find you all on social media.
Please come over, take a look at our website. We are with the SI Network, so we are si.com/college/Tennessee. You can find us on Twitter at _VR2_. You can search us on Instagram or Facebook at VR2. We've been working through kind of who are some of Tennessee's top targets, who are some of the top targets remaining in the position groups where there is still a big need, how are some of these numbers going to shake out. We've been talking a little bit about which freshmen from this 2020 class could come in and find themselves in the starting role early. And we've also been trying to break the news on players that have departed the team or been asked to leave the team or dismissed from the team, and how Tennessee's going to address some of those holes and some of the younger players that could potentially step up and fill those needs. We'll be keeping an eye on this Peyton Page recruitment and his announcement next week. That's going to be a big one. As we hear anything or as we're able to get anything put together, we'll have that leading up to it. So we're going to be on top of the breaking news as it comes down. We've got some coming. So, and then hopefully we're going to be starting to talk about hopefully start talking about fall, maybe a fall camp soon. Maybe, hopefully.
That'd be nice. That'd be nice. Where can everybody find your work, Brandon, and of course Matt on here as well? But where can everybody find stuff from VR2?
Again, we're on si.com/college/Tennessee, and again, Twitter _VR2_, and then search VR2 on Instagram and Facebook.
We are RockyTopInsider.com, and you can find us Rocky Top Insider on YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook as well. I appreciate all of you tuning in for this episode of the RTI Recruiting Podcast, and until next time, we'll talk to you guys later.